So we're going to restructure our code into functions. So here's a little dog bone, some edges on that now. If you look at my code over here, at the start, this is just kind of setting the scene. We're creating the canvas, background color. We're changing the angle mode from radians to degrees. Set up. And the first piece we come into is the bone zone. So this first bit just sets the bone color, and then this is drawing the bone. Next, we set the dog fur color and draw the dog body. Draw the tail, draw the top jaw, bottom jaw, eyes, pupil. So instead of having all this lengthy code within the setup, we can separate it into functions, which is cool because then you can also reuse that same block of code by calling that function again. So what does that look like? Why don't we do it with the bone code? So we're going to take this whole bit of code as drawing the bone, and remember it's using push and pop so that we can draw it around this center point and have it rotate around there. So I'm just going to take all this code, Command X, clip it out, and then move down outside of the setup function. So this was the bottom curly bracket of the setup function. And here's the draw. I'm just going to go ahead to the very bottom of my code. And now we're going to define a new function. So to do that, type function, space, the name of the function, draw a bone. And then parentheses, curly brackets, and then inside these two curly brackets, I will just paste that whole bone code. Get rid of that first line. Just tidying up, being a Virgo. Okay. So now we've moved the draw bone function or the draw bone code into this function. So we're no longer seeing it because it's not in setup anymore. I just twirled these different code blocks in so we can see the highest level of what's in our code. So we have this function called setup, this function called draw, and this function called draw bone. So setup gets called once when it starts, so this function is being called. But draw bone, here we've defined it to draw the bone. But in order to see that code, we have to now call this function. So this was defining what draw bone is. And now in order to call it, you don't need to write function anymore. You just write the name of the function, draw bone, followed by parentheses. Great. And now that bone is being drawn again. And these parentheses that follow a function name, these parentheses always indicate that that is a function and that it's being executed. So when you see those parentheses, it's one way to know that what you're looking at is indeed a function. Awesome. So you can go around and do this for all the different code, all these different kind of blocks or chunks of code, and then this will end up looking really neat. Let's just see, let's pretend. So we're going to draw one for the dog body. And this function will probably be called draw doggo body. And you want to give your functions and your variables always really clear names. I mean, we could call it, you know, wild times, but how would we know that that was actually drawing the dog body? Okay, so if we try to run this, whoa, error. Draw doggo body is not defined. That's because we're trying to call this function but haven't defined it yet. So in order to define this function, I'm going to take this block of code here, which was drawing the dog, and move it into a function called draw doggo body. And notice when you declare a function, the name should, by convention, start with a lowercase. Okay, so there. Now we have a function called draw doggo body, and we are seeing it because it's being called in this setup function. Now, one thing about this. Okay, so let's make another function called draw top jaw. Top dog, down to the bottom, function, draw top jaw. And then, did I grab that code? Whoa. Oh, so it looks like I moved the draw dog. Okay, I got a little sloppy here in my copy and pasting. So it looks like my draw dog tail got sucked inside my draw dog body code. So I'm going to put that down here. Draw dog tail. Parentheses, always the same syntax every time. So draw dog tail, draw top jaw. I still need to pull that for making you dizzy going through this code like this. Okay, draw top jaw. Now go into this draw top jaw. Wonderful, and now we need to call. We've moved that code there, and so now we're not seeing the tail or the top jaw because we have defined these functions, but we haven't called them in setup yet. So draw dog tail and draw top jaw. So here we have draw bone, draw doggo body, draw top jaw, draw dog tail. Cool, so now we're seeing them all again. Now, let's just mess things up for a moment. Okay, now my tail is white. What is going on here? So it turns out that inside draw doggo body is the code for the fur color. I'll cut this out. And because the compiler is executing things line by line, it was drawing this dog tail before it got to the code to draw the dog body. So how can we remedy this? We can just make sure that this draw fur color is above all of these different dog commands. Great. But what if for some reason well, actually, this should be fine. What if for some reason we draw a bone? Whoa. What if for some reason we draw a bone kind of in the middle of drawing these dog body stuff? Okay. So now what's happened is that in draw bone, in this function, it has changed the fill and the stroke color to be the same as the bone. So now we see the draw dog tail as having this dog color, and then as soon as it draws the bone, everything else has this bone color. So you could remedy this in a couple different ways. You can just keep these very organized in how they're executed, or you could set the fill and the stroke specific to each element at the top of that function. And by that I mean, okay, draw bone, we know that the color for draw bone is inside the bone function. So that maybe now inside of draw dog tail, inside of doggo body, inside of top jaw, and all these different functions, we could set the color for them. Now this is something that you might say, well, hey, this code is redundant because it's occurring at different parts or over again in your page. But you know what? If you're going to draw these things, they all need to have the right color. Okay, so I think that's working now. And in function setup, so we have tail, body, top jaw. What else is left? Bottom jaw, eye, and pupil. So I will create functions for those in a second, but I think you're getting the idea. See how much neater this looks like instead of like all that wild code. We can see right here exactly what's happening. We're drawing the bone, we're drawing the tail, we're drawing the body. And in order to kind of get an overview of your code, if you were to fold everything up, you can see that, okay, they're set up in draw, and that there's these functions that are going to do these specific things. So everything's just a lot more tidier, and you can also like reuse these code blocks for example, let's do something with draw a bone. So it would be cool if there was more than one bone on the page, and if they were in different places, and if they had different rotations. Okay, so in order for us to do that, we have to create parameters for this draw a bone function. So kind of the same way that, you know, when you create the canvas, you set a width and a height. We are going to, when drawing this bone, set an X and a Y position and then a rotation. So if we look at the draw bone function, as we're writing it, we can decide that we want certain variables that are passed into the functions, or certain values that are passed in as parameters. Sometimes these are called arguments. They're, for the most part, interchangeable. Like a parameter is the placeholder. As soon as you pass in a value, it's an argument, but really that's just a nuance of this language. So draw a bone, we're going to have an X position, a Y position, and a rotation value. And these are just words that I am making up. These are just something that makes sense as a descriptive term for what we're looking at here. So X position, Y position, rotation. So where do we see the X position and the Y position come into play? Well, let's just do it with the rectangle. We have this X and this Y, so like it's a 0, 0. So maybe instead of that 0, we'll go X pos, short for position, and this is Y pos. Cool. And then the rotation right here, rotate by rotation. So what I just did is replace the values inside these different drawing functions with variables which we are passing into it as arguments or parameters in the function that we're declaring. Whoa, a lot of lingo there, but hopefully it will make sense and hopefully it'll work. So X, Y, rotation. So let's just see, draw a bone. What if we make the X and Y, I don't know, 10, and this is going to be relative. Well, let's see, 10, 10. Oof, actually, this is not, we're going to have to redo this, but for now, 10, 10, and 10. Okay, so it worked. The thing is, I just updated it for the rectangle. I didn't bother with doing it for the ends of the bones yet because it would take a little finessing. And also, I did something kind of wrong, which is that in this draw bone function, I changed the position of where the rectangle was being executed. But really, what we want to change is this translation location, because remember that was what was setting it as being 0.7 of the width, 0.2 of the height. That was what was setting this anchor point around which this was being drawn. So actually the 0, 0 is just referencing the anchor point which we're setting right here. So this should really be X pos, Y pos, and that will solve the problem of the ends of it being off too. So let's see. Cool. Now it's way over here because we set the position to be at 10, 10, so it's right here. So let's go ahead and make that. I'm just going to grab another location. So width times 0.6, so here and then down here. So we may not even see this. It might be hidden. Oh, there it is. It's getting close to the mouse. Cool. And I'm going to duplicate this line, so Shift-Command-D. So the cool thing about having the code delegated to a function is it now becomes this block, this module that you can use over and over again. So I drew the bone once down there. Now say I want to draw it again at height times 0.2, so it'll be way higher up now. Cool, and I have another bone there. And say I want this bone to be rotated -20. Yeah, so now here we are with multiple bones. And this one down here, I'm going to scoot it over a little bit. That's getting really close to that mouse. And so another thing that I could add into this function, and that you might want to try, is how to scale the different bones, like different bones, different sizes, all in the background, by adding another parameter. Yeah, there we go. So restructure your code into functions. Create at least one that has parameters that you've set, arguments, parameters, and yeah.